Computer, cool beans. Hello, folks. This is another episode of Going South. Today, Eric Howard, who is on the Valdosta City Council for District 4, was kind enough to make time and chat with me today. As some of you might know, I've kind of been in an exchange with the mayor regarding some content on his conservative talk radio show. I sent an email to the mayor asking for him to address some of that, and I included the city council and a number of city council members, 3 in it to be exact, responded to me, and Mr. Howard was kind enough to do that as well as be willing to talk with me. The other folks that responded weren't willing to come on the podcast and chat. So first and foremost, Mr. Howard, thank you for making time today to chat with me. I really appreciate it. I know we're all busy, we all work, and so taking time out to do more stuff is always appreciated. Can we just talk about a little bit, so we were just talking before I started recording, I think folks should know this. You're from Cuthbert, Georgia, right?
Yes, sir.
And
yes, sir.
How long were you in the Air Force?
4 years.
Okay. And we're stationed here and kind of stayed, I guess it's close enough to family and everybody near Albany, I guess.
That's correct. Yes, yeah. Sir. That's correct.
I got you. And we've talked about this a second ago, but what was there anything in particular that made you throw your hat in the political ring?
Well, no, it was just talking to people in the community, asking different questions and saying, I think you have answers for some of these questions. So why don't you throw your head in the ring and decide to run? And so when Mr. Payton decided he wasn't going to run, so I thought it was a perfect time for me to get in and try to serve.
I got you. Well, in your district, I'm looking at the district map. Your district is kind of broke up into 2 pieces, right? Is that right?
Yes, it's a large district. The lines are drawn kind of funny, but yeah, I have a pretty diverse district, but it is a large district. Yes.
Yeah. When were those district lines drawn? Do you know?
Now that I couldn't tell you because I've heard 2 different things, but I haven't been able to put my finger on it yet. So I don't want to give anything that's not correct.
Yeah. So these are 2 sections for the folks who aren't looking at the map that aren't contiguous. They don't touch each other. You're kind of from Pine View up Bemis Road, it looks like, north, and then kind of over, it's a weird shape, over towards J.C. Shack Road, almost up to like Mount Zion Road. And then it stops, it looks like, or there's a little section in the back, and then you can continue on up Bemis Road to Guest Road. So it's the reason Go ahead. No, the reason I ask is I was just trying to figure out, I looked at the census tract data on it, so you can look up census tracts. Those district lines kind of overlap a couple of different census tracts, but they're pretty diverse. I think the median age is like 29 in most of that area. The poverty rate varies a little bit. One section's like 17%, the other's 33%. Median income is really pretty high compared to other parts in town. So I don't know, I just find it fascinating when we have districts that are strangely drawn and disconnected like that.
Yes, I mean, I think for me, I think that's good because when you're running for political office, you don't want to base it solely on race. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to go out here and tell people why you want to run, why you think your ideas are better, and let them decide. I just don't like the idea of just going out here and saying, okay, well, I'm a black man, all the black people should vote for me, or I'm a white woman and all the white people should vote for me. I don't believe in that. I think ideas, you put your ideas out and let people decide who has the best ideas, whether they're no matter what color or what party they're with. You put your ideas out and let the people decide.
Yeah, they're both still heavily black though, aren't they? 60% or higher. I mean, is that fair to
Well,
say?
in my district, when I ran 4 years ago, my district was, I think it was like 52-48. So
Gotcha.
my district is closely,
Yeah.
as far as the registered voters, yeah, my district is closer to 50-50 than most
Yeah.
districts.
Well, and what's interesting, my folks moved here in 1971, so I grew up on Los Ann Drive. I don't know if you know where Los
Right.
Ann is.
Yes, I know exactly where it is.
Yeah, kind of near Volanton Drive. And one of the things that I witnessed, and my parents they certainly participate in it too. And this is one of the things I wanted to ask you, and as well as the other council members. Having lived here for over 45 years, and Albany versus Lee County had an interesting dynamic of white flight there, and help me if you see this differently, but what I've seen in my lifetime here is very little change, actually kind of deindustrialization, the loss of, companies and businesses, basically from Gordon Street south. So for example, I used to work downtown recently, and when we look at the development in the community, the vast majority of it's on the north end of town. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Yeah. And so in my life, go ahead.
And I think from the time I've been in Valdosta and talking to people that have been here their entire lifetime, when the overpass was put in Valdosta, that it killed. And I hate to say that word killed, but it
killed them.
Severely impacted the downtown area and the south side of Valdosta.
Yeah.
Because now people can just drive over that area versus stopping at a local mom and pop shop or business coming there to relocate because they think people are just gonna go over it. So it helped with a traffic issue and a public safety issue, but in another way, it definitely, hurt businesses, and especially in that area of town, that minority area of town where people weren't able to continue to do their business because, they didn't see the foot traffic because things happen.
Yeah, it's totally true. Did you know also that initially they didn't get the overpass over all the railroad tracks? Because the rationale behind the overpass was EMS would get stuck by the train trying to respond to calls on the south end of town, right? So what's ironic about that overpass is that when they built it, there were still train tracks on one end of it that were being used. So next thing you know, you're on the overpass, you're parked up in the sky, but you're still waiting on the daggum train. And so
I do remember that.
It's pretty wild how, I don't know how all that happened, but initially it didn't solve the problem. But you're right. When I was a kid, there were tons of Black-owned businesses there. My dad and I would go down and get barbecue at Mitchell's. There was a repair shops, all kinds of stuff going on, and that was definitely impacted when the overpass was put in. And in my lifetime, what I've seen is kind of Black folks have social mobility, right? Buy homes, move, kind of. Because when I was a kid also, the cookie factory on 4th Street.
Yes, I do. I remember that. It used to have the whole city would be lit up with that smell when they.
Oh yeah, our neighbor. Yeah,
I was here during that time.
Yeah. I love that smell. It certainly wasn't a paper mill, right? So it was Crackling Good Bakery, and it was a division of Winn-Dixie, I believe, but they made all their cookies. I worked there briefly on the Moon Pie line. So I didn't last long, but, basically, and this is again in 1970, it was working class white folks largely, I would say from probably Gordon or Cypress north. And then Black folks initially started buying houses. And I remember real estate agents trying to scare white folks about their property values and all this stuff. But it seems to me what we've seen is this kind of migration of Black Valdostans up Forest Street, right, up kind of Ashley and Bemis Road, you know, and it's not to say there aren't black folks in other neighborhoods, because there are, but the demographic changes have been real interesting to watch. And as someone who loves data, you know, my parents sold their house on Los Ann in 1987 or 88 for $34,000. And when you look at the value of it today, it's about the same compared to, you know, home ownership. Generally over 10, 20 years, it accumulates a lot more equity and worth and value. So having said that, I think one of the things I've struggled with the mayor, because I listen to his show regularly, our members listen to his show, is that when he talks about Valdosta, I don't know if he is speaking about all Valdostans. I mean, I don't know, for example, as of late, some of the big issues have been the RV show in Jacksonville, the mayor's float on the river that's coming up, the Annette Howell Turner Arts Center, but I don't ever hear him talking about the fact that a third of the folks that live in Valdosta live in poverty, according to the census. You know, I don't hear him talking about what that means for the community and why some folks are locked in poverty and why some, you know, districts and census tracts have poverty rates of 50% or higher, you know. So do y'all talk about that as a council?
Well, I can tell you what we did, and I just want to make sure when I'm speaking now, I am a councilman, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the city.
Right.
But right. I can tell you that we do speak as far as with our actions. What we try to do is, we know a job, a good paying job with benefits will help lift that, raise that poverty rate, get a lot of people out of it. So what we do in Valdosta, what this council have decided to do, we want to get ourselves ahead of the grid, because the United States is we're an old country. So we put a lot of money into getting our infrastructure together, so we could be attracting other businesses to come here, good paying jobs where people can work one job and take care of their family, because we know the family is the backbone of America. If you can have the family working one job where they can attend to their children, you know, the homework, the after school activities, making sure they stay out of trouble, that's the way to raise yourself out of poverty. So when we talk about those things as a city and as a council, that's more the line we go towards, because we want people to, it's a pocketbook issue. So we can get businesses to come here and invest money and hire people and pay them decent wages. That's our way of lifting people out of poverty. Now, you don't want to make it about race, because then when you do that, you tend to get a entire segment off. You won't get the help. But if you make it about pocketbook issues, that's something that people can understand.
Yeah.
Not to say that race doesn't play a part,
yeah.
But if you start making it solely about race, you turn off a whole segment of people that could possibly help you in getting the goal achieved that you want to get achieved.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing is the white poverty seems to be concentrated in the county when I look at the data, right? And when we're talking about Valdosta, we're talking about a predominantly Black city that votes predominantly Democrat in the county. I mean, the white flight not only kind of went northward, but it's also the city county split in terms of the school systems and other things. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things I don't hear a lot in kind of the local political discussions, is that really, I think there are two Valdostas, right, in many ways, but also and Albany, you know, where you're kind of close to where you're from, went through the same thing with Lee County, right? And it seems to me that the city is on, and this kind of will get us into the current political situation, is for the first time, Black folks have a majority on the city council, right?
Right.
Yeah. And we have these at-large districts that are strange creations, if you ask me. But it seems to me that Valdosta kind of teeters and and I don't want to make it all about race, because you're right, it's about class too. I would say it's about a few other things. But at the same time, Valdosta, since it's a predominantly Black city, there's a high concentration of Black poverty. And again, that's not to say all Black folks are poor. Whereas in the county, the rural white poverty looks a little bit different. It's not as, heavily concentrated. But it seems to me that we're teetering on, especially just given what I see and hear on Facebook and in conversations with folks, we have all this growth, which is predominantly white on the north end of town, heading towards Hahira, right? And the kind of Moody corridor as well. There's tons of stuff happening up there. And when we look at real estate prices, that's kind of where it's a premium, pretty much North Valdosta Road northward. And I'm just wondering if you think that Valdosta, as we continue to go down this road, will at some point, be like an Albany, Lee County, where it's a predominantly Black city, where white folks have fled even more to the north end of town or to the county. I could even see Hahira becoming a new municipality at some point in the next 20 years, if not sooner. I mean, is that?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I definitely understand where you're coming from, but I would go back to this. I think a lot of stuff that people hear and say that plays a huge part in it. I mean, let's just say, for instance, if someone lived in a predominantly white neighborhood, let's say there was an affluent neighborhood, and someone Black, let's say they did the right thing and climbed up the ladder and moved into the neighborhood.
Right.
Instead of a white person moving out of the neighborhood because they didn't want to be around a Black person, what made you decide to move? And then that's when you have the conversation, because if you think that the police overserves your community or underserves your community, if you stay there, maybe you can help with the dialogue to say, okay, well, I'm going to stay in this neighborhood because I don't want people to come over here. I don't want the police to harass, or I don't want the police not to come as much. But people have to realize that Black people, white people, Hispanic people, they all want the same thing. They all want good paying jobs, good schools for their children, education, healthcare, and to be left alone. That's everyone wants the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no race that I've talked to that's ever said, well, I just want a bad paying job. I want the police to bother me. I want poor health care. I don't want my children to be in a good school. No, I've never met anyone who says that. So just because we may have different backgrounds or different skin color, that doesn't mean we don't have the same
right
goal.
But have you ever met white folks that will engage in that conversation who, because the other thing, at least what I've seen here, is the real estate folks fuel this process. There's a process called steering, and this happened in my neighborhood. As soon as Black folks kind of move on up in the George Jefferson sense of the word, they generally, move into a neighborhood that's a different economic class. And what we know is about, if one or two families do that, that's fine. But if too many, it's usually around 8%. So if it's a community of 100 people, if there's 8 Black families, all of a sudden you'll start seeing this exodus, because the real estate agents, and kind of, I think it's a part of being white too. The assumption is people are going to lose value in their homes if there's too many people that aren't white there. And it's kind of just built in. And I guess I've seen it happen here. I've seen it happen in every city I've lived in. And so have you actually seen white folks that do what you said, like stay put and go, you know what, everybody wants the same thing. We all want good schools, good paying jobs.
Well, I tell you, I mean, I really would like for you to do this in my district. I mean, because if you look at the Jory Springs area, up and down Northside Drive, in the Orlando area, the area that I'm a councilman in, there are older white people who still live here.
Yeah.
and in this district, and they have black neighbors, and they were able to, they're able to, we're a good neighborhood. We look out for one another. I just think that when we get to the point where that fear factor sets in because of things that they see on television or things that they've heard, then people take that fight or flight mentality. Now, some people may not move because they're financially not able to move.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
right.
they're making the best of a situation.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think that the people in my district are staying here because they live here beside someone that may be a different color or a different religion, a different ethnicity. And these are truly good people. And I'm gonna stay here because number one, I'm at an age where I'm not ready to start over.
Yeah.
And secondly, these people don't bother me. They want the same thing that I do. We're good neighbors, we're neighborly, we talk to one another, we look out for one another's property when we go on vacation or when one person's at work. And that's just the way life is. So I think that conversation is the best tool to try to get past our differences. I've never seen a problem solved without talking to someone.
No,
so that's why I say I didn't have a problem with this conversation with you. I mean,
but back to my thing, but back to
without talking to you.
Yeah, but I'm 57. I have never seen white folks do what you're saying they're going that needs to be done. And I'm just saying, hear me out though. I
tell you what, I can introduce you to some.
Okay, I'd love
to. After this podcast, I will introduce you to some.
Okay, I'd love to meet them.
I really want you to know. I think it's. And I'm like you, the radio, the television, they put a different spin on it, but I can introduce you to some right here in my district and probably some in the district where you live, because like I said, I like to talk and engage people. I guarantee you will realize we're not as bad off as we seem, but what we get to see is bad. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, and it kind of gets into all this is connected too. So I don't mean to go all over the map here, because what I saw in my neighborhood was black people kind of getting the shaft. Because what happened was as soon as the neighborhood reaches a tipping point where it's predominantly a minority, property values decline, whether people are keeping their house up or not. And so in my old neighborhood, this is why when we had the housing bubble in 2008, most of the black and brown folks in my life were like, what recession? Because as soon as white folks moved out of the neighborhoods they moved into, they lost value on their home immediately. And sometimes we're upside down in their mortgage just because. And I'll tell you a story on Forest Street. I had a good buddy of mine that lived kind of close to Northside Drive off of Forest between Forest Street and JC Shack Road in a kind of what was a new neighborhood. He'd been there forever with his two kids and his wife, white guy. I've known him all my life. I was in his wedding. And when it came time for his kids to go to school, they were going to have to go to Southeast. Now, my buddy would never say he's a racist. I've never heard him say a racist term in my life. But immediately they started looking to move to the county. And the language was they were worried about the education of their kids, right? So they ended up selling their house, making a profit because black folks bought it, moved out into the county, and then their kids were in Pine Grove. Now, the only problem with that story is if he'd have bothered to look at the test scores at Southeast for that year, they were better than Pine Grove.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And that's my issue with a lot of the things. And it's not just people; they're businesses who profit off of that. I mean, you got to remember, our board of realtors at one time they did the same thing. They would advertise houses saying county schools, city schools. So when people who weren't from here, who just look around the country, they know city schools meant inner city.
It's code, right?
County schools meant white people, better education. But when you take military families like what we have at Moody, they look at our STEM. And they realize, they look at our scores and they say, well, I can live in the city and this is a better school system. I mean, because of the stuff that's offered.
Yeah.
And when we get orders to go somewhere else, my children won't be behind. Now, I'm not saying that the county schools are bad,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying, if you look at the city school system, what the city school system offers and their scores, you can't compete with the stuff that's offered or the scores. And then on top of that, let's just say, for instance, let's say you can buy a house right across the street from someone, and they're in the county, you're in the city, you're not avoiding any crime. We're right across the street from one. Only thing you're losing by being in the county is fire protection and a water treatment facility.
Yeah.
Because across the street in the city, we have fire departments all over the city limits, and we have a water treatment facility. So when you start to do your math and adding it up, okay, am I really evading crime? Because most criminals have a vehicle or they have a ride to go commit the crime. So I just want people to get to the point where we're talking to each other and not talking past one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk about jobs a little bit? Because I know the mayor opposes the $15 minimum wage. And one of the things he regularly says, and I hear this among other white conservative political commentators on other local shows, is that nobody should be paid that much because all these entry-level jobs are not supposed to be a livable wage. And I think one of the things they don't understand is that work has changed. Do you know what I mean? Like, jobs have always been a problem here, from my perspective, in terms of jobs where a person works 40 hours a week and makes enough to live, And so I guess there's a couple of things. And over the years, I've also seen certain council folks promote certain industries, give them tax breaks, infrastructure support, all with the promise that they're going to create jobs. But does the city ever go back? And I think of two businesses in particular that just got all kinds of tax breaks and infrastructure support with the promise of creating jobs. But does the city ever go back and when we kind of court industry to see if they delivered on the jobs they promised?
Well, I can say since I've been in office, I've been a proponent of attracting high-paying jobs. And I don't want to call the industry's name out because I don't want people to say I'm anti-business, but I would tell them all the time, we don't need any more of this type of business here. Let's get the warehouse, that will pay people a decent wage. And you can have the stores. You can have all your Dollar General stores. Take them back. Let us get the warehouse that'll pay people decent money, where they can, raise their family off of them. So, and when you say go back, I can't tell you that there's been a study on it, but I can tell you, the question has been asked, what age do you want to say the minimum wage of $15? Or if you say a $10 minimum wage for high school students, at what age do you want to say the minimum wage is $15? Because I understand, some small businesses are mom and pop businesses. They may not make that type of money, but when you get to a certain position as a business, when I say, let's say like these convenience stores and these Dollar Generals and these families, they're popping up everywhere. So they have to be making money. No one's building the building to not make money. So what I'm saying, when we say we don't want to put it on our small business, let's define what we consider a small business, what we consider a family business, and let's make a decision on what we do then, because I don't want people thinking that $7.50 is going to do anything. I mean, it's good that people have a job, but you're not raising a family on that. You're not taking care of all of your households or your entire household on that. And these businesses are being subsidized by the federal government, because if you look at a Walmart worker who's making, let's say $8-9 an hour, if they get WIC, and food stamps and government assistance,
right, which they
you're
qualify
being
for.
you're being subsidized.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to get it mixed up, thinking that, okay, well, I'm making $15 an hour. Maybe you won't be qualified for some of this assistance, but you'll be able to sustain yourself. But if I'm making $9 an hour or $8 an hour, I'm not able to do everything. So now the rest of that money that Walmart, when they get their tax breaks, now they are getting money for people to get WIC, food stamps, and government assistance, rental assistance. So the money is coming from somewhere. So that's why I want people to take a look at the big picture.
Yeah. Well, can I just make a request that when y'all, especially if you run again and stay on council, over the years, I don't think there's ever been any retrospective analysis, right, where they've gone back and made sure, I think two things: make sure that the jobs show up, but also do the math on what the jobs cost in terms of the trade-offs for the jobs. And I was wondering about this with I know y'all just voted to approve submitting a proposal to, what was the airline? Is it American?
For American Airlines to possibly consider coming here, yes. Yeah.
So I didn't hear in any of the discussion how many jobs that's supposed to create and how that benefits Valdosta, and is there a lot of traffic that wants to go to Charlotte? I know it's a hub for them, but has there been any analysis if whether there's even a demand for that hub or that carrier to be here?
Well, I mean, there is a demand for it. Now, as far as the Charlotte to Valdosta connection, that's something that would benefit the airline. But reason why you didn't get any pushback from me on it is because it wasn't going to cost the city a dime. Right. So if all we have to do is apply for the grant, and the rest of it is pretty much based on the airport selling themselves and American Airlines accepting. So if it's not going to cost our citizens any money, I'm not going to get in, I'm not going to fight it, but it will create jobs because American Airlines is going to have to come here. They're going to have someone to sell tickets, someone to load the plane, someone to, to do that. So it's going to create some job, but as long as it doesn't cost us money where I feel like, okay, I'm going to be wasting taxpayers' dollars. Yeah, there would have been an issue with me. I would have asked those questions. But since it was a grant that we were able to apply for, and all we had to do
grant? Yeah, who writes the grant?
The grant was written, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to say anything that's not true. I want to think the grant. I think it was some type of Department of Transportation.
But does somebody in the city have to write it though? Because y'all have to write the proposal, right?
They gave us the blueprint of how it should be written, and then we just pretty much copied off of that and submitted it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of those things that I know everybody except one person voted for it. But I didn't hear any discussion on how many jobs. I did hear the discussion that it supposedly won't cost the city anything, but it does sound like it'll cost some folks time to write up the proposal and apply for the grant. But did you hear anything about the number of jobs by any chance?
No, we didn't even get to that point because that won't even be discussed unless we're chosen.
Right.
But as far as the grant paperwork, it's pretty much copy and paste.
Okay.
It's pretty much copy and paste. It's a standard form. And if United Airlines decide, okay, Valdosta, they do their business projections and say, okay, I think Valdosta to Charlotte, that'll be a good hub because now we getting people from Charlotte to Valdosta, and then possibly later we can do one from Valdosta to Miami or Valdosta to Orlando, or that cuts off some people's drive time from Charlotte to Orlando to go to Disney World. So all of those things are being thought about, but no, we didn't even get into the jobs part because we know if they come here, they're going to have to hire some people to work.
Yeah. Do you ever think, one of the things that we did back in the 90s here, and this is one of the reasons some of us want Confederate statues off of public property, is that there've been rumblings among kind of development people here that companies wouldn't come because the place was so conservative, was so controversial in some ways, and that it wasn't seen as a progressive place. And I'm just wondering, what keeps good paying jobs from coming to the South? Because we have cheap labor, we have no unions, which companies generally don't like. And I understand that we're competing with a lot of other places, but Valdosta is kind of this hub city, right? That's on a major thoroughfare, does have a kind of regional airport. I mean, what have you kind of identified, or has folks identified why it is so hard to get good paying jobs here?
Well, with me personally, I just think we're not selling ourselves. And I really believe that. I really think this is an area where the city and county can combine and work, where we can sell ourselves. We can sell what we have right here in Lowndes County and Valdosta. I don't think we're doing a good enough job of doing that. I know we have a Georgia Military College, we have GMs, we have Valdosta State, we have Wiregrass who will cater a program to any job that decides they want to come. We have 75, 41, Highway 84. We have 2 railroads running through here. We're only 3 hours from, Atlanta, and we have a Delta Airlines that flies from Atlanta to Valdosta and back and forth. So I just think if we had just a combined effort from the city and county to put the money into the resources to sell Valdosta, Lowndes County, I believe that would be a tremendous asset to the community. I believe we could get more jobs. Now, like I said, this is me speaking personally. I just don't believe that we have that effort. We don't have a strong enough effort selling ourselves. Now, the industrial authority, they do a great job, reaching out to try to get people in, get people here. But when you see all the time that Georgia's #1 state for business, you have to ask yourself why and what part of Georgia. Atlanta's filling up. There's there's not a lot of room for growth. So all of that stuff on the outskirts, why can't that come to Valdosta? Because like you said, we're right here. We should be booming right now. And I think with us doing the infrastructure projects that we're doing, our city is going to be a little bit more attractive than a lot of other cities that prioritize other things. I think Valdosta is on the cusp of doing great things.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the arguments that I and others have made over the years as we've tried to do race relations work here, inequality work here. Back in 2009, we went before city council, packed the chamber, and approached the city about addressing kind of the racial atrocities that were committed in Lowndes County. And what we told them was that we have that, and folks didn't want to do that. They didn't want to talk about racial inequality, or class inequality, and some of the problems that plague a big section of our community. But we suggested to them, look, why not be the vanguard for this kind of work? Why not model to the rest of the country how to do reconciliation work, how to be an inclusive, multicultural community? Because the reality is large corporations recognize the country is changing. The country is changing. That's why we've seen, a variety of corporations support things like gay marriage, Black Lives Matter. We'll go down a litany of things. But it does seem to me, and folks on the council and the mayor at the time almost couldn't hear that, and I suggested this to the mayor in the letter I wrote or one of the letters I wrote to him, that the nation is incredibly divided. We've seen it right in the last election. We see it here with Confederate flags and all kinds of things that go on. We see it in the fact that people don't take their campaign signs down from their yards as some kind of political statement. I don't know about you, but wearing a mask. I worked at a place where I was the only person wearing a mask, and it was a political statement to them. You know, and y'all, I mean, one of the interesting things that I was proud of that y'all passed the mandate for the mask downtown, right? But then nobody wore them. You know, so I guess what I'm saying to you is, I would argue if we want good paying jobs that benefit the whole community, then we have to kind of model to the country that we are dealing with things, right? And we are trying to heal the divide and having the conversations, to go back to something you said earlier, that most places are shying away from. And this is one of my big beefs with the mayor's radio station, as well as WVGA. What I would argue that the mayor's been engaged in as a private citizen and now as an elected official is creating division and almost selling division. But I think any media outlet that makes a bunch of claims about people in a community that media outlet is based in, but won't talk to those people, will talk about them all day long as if they're the enemy, right? And sells ad space on those media outlets that they're just not good for our community. And that's not to say we should, you know, squash anybody's free speech. But I guess I'm saying two things. It seems to me that we have an opportunity to model again to the rest of the country, what does racial healing and reconciliation look like? How do we close the cultural divide that's along political and racial lines in many places, including here? And would that, you know, help with economic development in a way that would benefit folks?
Well, you said a lot. So
I know.
let me
I'm
try to
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So no, you're fine. Let's start with the mask mandate. You don't have to tell me because I'm the one who brought it up, and so you could see the emails and phone calls that I received about I'm taking your freedoms and I'm doing this and that. But like I tell people, there's nowhere you can go with that mask on that you couldn't go before.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, you know, I just tell people that go ahead.
Well, how is asking somebody to protect other people and themselves an infringement on freedom?
It's not. And I tell people all the time, your rights and freedoms end where mine begin.
Right.
So I tell people all the time, we're in the South. We're a big, big, big Second Amendment area. Everyone loves the Second Amendment. So let's just say, for instance, if George thought I was infringing upon his rights by not wearing a mask, does he have the right to pull out his gun and shoot me?
No.
Because you know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We have to stop with this. I mean, and I hate to make it seem that simple, but what I'm saying, I don't have the right to come up to George and cough in his face and laugh because I don't like the mask mandate, because I just put him in jeopardy because I don't know if Mark has a pre-existing condition or he doesn't know if I have COVID.
Right.
But what we're doing is I think we're being insensitive to the people who have lost lives, who've lost homes, who lost jobs, who's lost almost everything that they had because of this virus.
Yeah.
Now I know people can say, well, it wasn't started here, it was man-made in China. I don't know where it was man-made, but all I'm saying is it's here.
Right.
And I work at the hospital. I see the data every day of how many people come here, how many people are tested, how many people test positive. So at the time when I asked for that mandate in March, all we had was the information that we had. And all the experts, all the medical experts telling us the best way to protect ourselves, put a mask on, wash your hands, socially distance. And that's the same information that we have now. So when I proposed the mandate, it wasn't to put the mayor on the spot or to put our other council members on the spot. I did it because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And the mayor's had COVID. Say again?
And the mayor's had COVID too.
Well, but that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And when it comes back to going back to another topic that you touched on, I think what we have to do with our conversations is we're going to always push people apart if we try to belittle them and make them feel less than. So what I tell people all the time, it would be crazy for me to go out there and say everyone who supported Donald Trump is racist.
Yeah.
That would be a false statement. So you can't bring people to the table when you're starting your conversation off with a statement like that. You have to realize in the United States, there are people who are a lot older than me that don't look like me, that see the life, that see the world that they lived in change right before their eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're seeing Black people in power, Black people taking jobs that they thought they would never have, being elected. So they're not, I won't say they're racist. It's just the fact that they never thought that they would see this. And a lot of them are afraid because they feel that a lot of the stuff that they hear on these radio stations and some of this stuff is true, that Black people are going to be doing to
our country.
What happened to Black people. And I don't want people to think that. I want people to realize that Black people are just as genuine and kind as white people. We want the same things that you want. Good jobs, protection for our family, good schools, and to be left alone. That's it. We don't want to take anything from white people. Just like I'm quite sure no Hispanic person wants to take from a white person or any other nationality. But you look at you look at Valdosta, for instance. If a Black person climbs their way up the ladder and moved in a predominantly white neighborhood, some white people will move out. But if you take a white person who happens to stumble upon hard times and move into a Black neighborhood, they're welcome with open arms. Yeah. What can we do to help them?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that doesn't happen in reverse, but most of the time when you see it here in Valdosta, it's because a white person may have stumbled upon hard time and they come into a neighborhood that's not as affluent as it was.
Yeah.
And they're being welcomed. So why is it because we don't talk to one another. We're talking at and past one another.
Exactly, right. And talking about one another instead of with one. But you said a number of important things, though, that kind of make my point for me, though. I think first, wasn't the mass split along racial lines on the city council?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe, really, I want to think it was split more, it was, racial lines, but I think it was more political lines, because that's why I took issue with it.
Like Republican Democrat?
Yeah, but we're our elected officials, it's nonpartisan when you're living in local.
Right.
But that's what I think. That's why I took more issue with it, because all I heard was, freedom this, and I don't think we should. We can ask people to do it, but I don't think we should mandate it. I think we can strongly suggest it. And my only argument was this: when you have this conversation with your children about the birds and the bees, do you strongly suggest it?
Yeah.
Or do you tell them, if you do this, you better have this?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't fall for that kind of food. I know it was political, but like I said, I get along with all of mine.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you don't, though.
And I just don't want people to get it twisted when you get to the point where you're talking about political and racial.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was racial. I just believe it was totally political, because some people just strongly supported the president of the United States, and they didn't want to seem to be going against him, although the president of the United States would have never tweeted their name, never called their name. So I think it was irresponsible to the citizens of Valdosta at that time.
Yeah, and I'm not a person that's only tool is a hammer and every problem's a nail, but I do think it's important. And I see this happen in Valdosta, and it frustrates me all the time. There are all these votes that do split along racial lines, and it may be political, but it's also still racial if it's political. Do you know what I'm saying? If all the white folks are Republican and all the black folks are Democratic, it's still racial while it is at the same time political too. And I think for me, we can't have conversations about it if we don't acknowledge that. And so the other thing you said was, I mean, when you were talking about older Americans feeling like black folks are taking their jobs and their country's changing in front of them, and like, what do you, so you don't think they're racist, but what do you call that white expectation that the good jobs are supposed to be for me, the White House is supposed to have somebody white in it, the TV is supposed to have me on it at particular times, we're supposed to control the power and the economics, like just the expectation of this kind of white entitlement to me is racism. You know, and
if you've only seen something for 50, 60, 70 years, that's what you grow to expect. I mean, I want
no doubt.
That's what people grow to expect. So when something different comes out, I mean, you think about when your parents first, you know, I'm quite sure you grew up with a black and white television. So when you got the colored television, you may have thought that an apple was orange. But then when you actually saw it on the television, it's red. You know, I'm just saying, I'm just using that. I'm just saying. But you know, now that you look at people who come out here now and they see you had a black president, or
a moderate black president with a white mama.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. When they say you're evil, so are you saying? So let's say if we were going to keep this on race only, so you can say, okay, so who was the evil person, the dad or the mom? Because he has a white mother. And
I don't think either of them are evil.
So
I think they're two. Yeah.
So which is the evil part? So that's what I'm saying. We have to get past this name calling and demagoguery and start having conversations. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with someone about policy, but I cannot start the conversation when it started off on lies like Sandy Hook didn't happen, or Parkland didn't happen, or the election was stolen, or a airplane didn't fly into the Pentagon. I can't have a conversation. How am I going to have a rational conversation with you about policy when you're denying basic facts? I can't have a conversation with you. So that's when I can just get turned off from you. And so now you can say, well, he doesn't want to talk. No, I'm just not going to discuss things like that because people died, and I'm being disingenuous and inconsiderate to the family members whose family members died at Parkland and Sandy Hook, and the people who died in 9/11, and when you're denying COVID, I can't have a conversation with you because I personally know people that I know and love who died and that are still suffering from it. So no, I can't have a conversation with you about that. So let's move on to something else that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I would just say my people, my white brothers and sisters, many of them know that they can't say what they're really thinking and feeling. So instead of being able to acknowledge that the Democrats, and I'm not a Democrat for the record, I'm not a Republican either. I did vote for both Democratic candidates in the last Senate runoff, though. I like Reverend Warnock. I think his theology is interesting. When we know we can't say what we're thinking and feeling, I would argue and our mayor does this currently. He did it today on his radio show. What you do instead is you claim voter fraud. You know what I'm saying? You can't really say, look, I really don't want this. Hold on a second. Let me
go ahead.
Yeah, let me get this out. So we know we can't, in a close election, we can't say we really just don't want some people to vote because they don't know what to do. I've heard our mayor talk about how glad he is that he won compared to his opponent in the last election because we would have been so messed up if that opponent won. He said that on his show. So for me, I see white folks in my life won't say what they really think. So again, psychologically, and then you get politicians that buy into this. Now the narrative is, well, there's been voter fraud, people getting paid to vote. There was mass fraud. And even when the Republican Party themselves say that's not the case, there's a whole cadre, somewhere between 40 and 50% of Donald Trump supporters, right, that still believe that the election was stolen, you know, which is a way in my mind for those of us who were white that who just want to hold on to power, really maybe don't even believe in democracy. I mean, I've never lived in any other state where voting is difficult as it is here. I just left Oregon 3 years ago. I was there, Mr. Howard, I was there 2 months. I had a ballot in the mail. I had a ballot with multiple folks that were running for office, a book with that ballot. I had 2 weeks to turn it in. I could turn it in a postal service. I could turn it in a ballot box. Nobody asked me for an ID. They don't even check to see if you're a convicted felon. They got that off, so they stopped disenfranchising folks that had done time, right? And I was like, where in the world am I at? Like, and no voter fraud. No voter fraud. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say and lead into is, as a sociologist, I can tell you, and I've told other folks this, voter fraud is non-existent when we look at the research. The problem in America is getting people to vote. It's not the reverse. There's always going to be a little voter fraud, right? And I asked James LaPlante, he's a political scientist here recently. I was like, Dr. LaPlante, in political science, what does the research show about, you know, voter fraud? He says, you're more apt to get struck by lightning twice than have a problem with voter fraud. So now we have, and this kind of gets me into the mayor and some of his disturbing commentary, we have folks locally, nationally, and regionally, like the person you referenced a little while ago, that clearly don't want to honor the results of the last election, you know, and are on our local airwaves every day suggesting that canvassers here were paid to vote, that they got recruited and they cashed their checks at the liquor store, that the mayor's co-host said that he supports voter suppression. The mayor joked and even said that we should have tests at polls, you know, and given the history of Georgia with poll taxes and literacy tests, all the ways we disenfranchised Black folks for decades, right? I don't know how somebody in office in a predominantly Black city can say those things. And not only that, would ever utter those things out loud as if they were appropriate without any evidence whatsoever. None. And then when he's approached by, you know, a local community member multiple times, that's not to mention what he said about migrants. It's not to mention what he said about the engineering of the COVID virus by the Chinese. That's not to mention, and I guess I mentioned it by bringing it up though, but basically saying we just need to move on as a nation as if January the 6th didn't happen, you know? So, I mean, to me, it goes back to those older white folks that don't want change, and social change upsets us all. You know, we're creatures of habit, right? But we say we live in a democracy. We say that, you know, we're supposed to be free and that freedom extends to everybody. But we have a mayor who conflates and confuses on his radio show. His radio show is, he talks more about himself as the mayor than anybody I've ever seen. He gives the itinerary for the day. He does a recap of what he did before as the day. He constantly refers to himself as the mayor. And then he gives his political opinion as if he's speaking for Valdosta, Georgia. You know, so 2 weeks ago, he said all these things. So there's a kind of mentality that he thought it was okay to make these claims about dozens of people I know that were excited about getting people to vote. You know, just excited about, you know how many, I mean, it almost makes me cry just talking about it, because I heard all these stories of canvassers, you know, talking to elderly folks who had never bothered to vote. And to have our mayor claim that these folks were just getting money at a, you know, a check that they cashed at a liquor store and were essentially, and even suggested they were committing crimes. that it was such a gray area that you know, the state didn't even bother to prosecute it. So he said all that stuff, but then, you know, you want to talk about kind of a white mentality. I mean, then he doesn't have to be accountable for any of it, even to another white person that wants to know, what did you mean by all this? You know? And it hurts me because it hurt people I love.
Well, I say this.
And I, you know, you were kind enough to respond to that email I sent everybody. So was a couple of other folks, and none of the white folks did, for the record. But that's kind of what we do when things don't go our way. We just pretend like it doesn't happen, and we want to move on. You know it.
Well, I'm gonna say this, and now, and I'm quite sure you're gonna agree with me. When you deal with people, and like I say, this is not me bashing the mayor or anything like that. So I didn't come on here to bash the mayor. I just came on here to have a dialogue with you because I feel like that's important for people in Valdosta to realize that, you know, you have people in the city who will come out and speak when you have an issue. When people say the election was stolen, I'm really talking to them right now. Why was it stolen? How was it stolen? Because Black people shouldn't have voted, or people or minorities shouldn't have voted, or because they didn't vote for the person that you wanted to win. So my question is, when you say stolen, we've had Republican governors, Republican secretary of states, lieutenant governors all over the United States tell you there were no massive voter fraud. But when you've been lied to for 5 years, over and over and over again on a daily basis, that the only way you can lose when you run again is voter fraud, you tend to believe it because they tell you they're doing such a wonderful job, because you're seeing what you want to see. Before this election, these are things that I know for fact because I saw. You had state houses that were controlled by Republicans that decided that we're not going to count the mail-in votes until after we release the same day vote. So when you saw news stations like CNN or MSNBC or Fox say there's a scenario where you can go to bed where Donald Trump is ahead, and you can wake up and Joe Biden will be ahead, Donald Trump may go out there and claim victory. So now you've thrown this whole narrative out there for 5 years that everything you hear on television is fake news. Facts be damned. It's fake news. So now when the votes start coming in from these heavily Black populations, Joe Biden takes the lead. Now all of a sudden the election is stolen. And I can't help that Black people decided to vote for Joe Biden. No Black person that I know is naive enough to believe that Joe Biden is going to be the savior of the Black community or to solve all our problems. But guess what? No S-hole countries. No, this is my African American over here. Yeah. None of that stuff was said by Joe Biden. So no, not any of this fine, very fine people on both sides. None of that stuff was said by Joe Biden. Now, when we go back to the canvassing part, when Stacey Abrams began her movement after she didn't win, it was her sole goal to register as many Democratic voters as possible. Now, I'm quite sure when they started canvassing, they probably knocked on some Republican people's door. They didn't tell them, no, you can't register. No, you're a Republican. They just went out to get more people registered. And it came to fruition. The people that she registered, they turned out. So does that mean it was stolen? Because they outwork someone? Because if that's the case, on a lot of jobs that we go to, you'll see people that don't look like us outworking people, but we're not in the supervisory roles. But we still come out here and we do the job that we're supposed to do. So when you use terms and words like stolen or accuse people of committing a felony, you don't realize how deeply that hurts us. So I understand when you say, I think the mayor should come and have a conversation or put some proof out. And when he doesn't, you feel like, okay, well, now since you don't have any proof of what you're saying, either you know what you're saying is not true and you're intentionally leading people on, you're part of the problem, or you're just trying to make money. So when you get to that point, I understand why people are upset, but I don't want people to think that when I get up here, I'm talking to you. Yes, I'm a city councilman for the District 4 of Valdosta. No matter what I say, if I came in here and said something inflammatory, they're not gonna say, well, that's Eric Howard who live on Deborah Drive. They're gonna say, that's Eric Howard, city councilman of Valdosta. So you're the city councilman and you're the mayor 24 hours a day, no matter what you say. If I go out there and get arrested, no one will care if I'm Eric Howard on Deborah Drive. Y'all saw the city councilman got arrested for shoplifting. That's what you're gonna hear. Wow. So words matter. Everything you do, you have consequences. Now, I'm not talking about your personal life. I really don't care if you want to be a creep and sleep around and do this or do that. That's fine. But when you're out here leading people, I think you should be telling the people the truth all the time. Everyone, including Donald Trump, knows that he did not win this election. He knows it. But it's a way of ginning up the base to get people to get people to continue this foolishness and to further divide us. As long as we're divided, you think about there's more poor people in the United States than there are rich people. If poor people were to unite, you wouldn't have to worry about a Republican Party or a Democratic Party. The poor people's party,
minimum wage.
And I think what people fail to realize in this election, that your words matter. And a lot of Republicans who were with Donald Trump just got tired of defending him. And so when you saw Warnock and Ossoff win, that's why I hope they don't get relaxed and continue and show that they meant what they said they were gonna do, because you're gonna have to run again. Yeah. And people just voted for you because they didn't want to they wanted to show Donald Trump and no, you were wrong, and so we repudiated everything about you. So you need to get in here and you need to do what you say you're gonna do, stand on principles, stand on morals, and then we'll put you back in the seat. But if you don't, we're not going to vote for you, because Black people alone can't elect the president. That's why I had to tell people, Barack Obama didn't win the election alone by Black people voting for him. There had to be a lot of white people to vote for him, and they did. But when you look at the news and the narrative, they want you to believe that Black people had the power to nominate and elect Barack Obama. They didn't. Yeah. Now they played a great part in it, but they did not elect him.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the criticisms of the Democratic Party, is that they only pay attention to Black folks and Latino folks and other minorities when they know it's going to be a close election, right? When folks are the swing vote, But let me ask you this, because the other thing that have you heard the mayor make any comment publicly about his perception of the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th?
I haven't on his radio station, because I haven't listened to his radio station in a while. I think the last time I listened to his radio station, I texted him about an issue, but I haven't personally talked to him about it, because I think after the election, you want to give people a cooling down, a calming down period. So, you know, you don't want to be the one that, you know, hey, how you doing? And blah, blah, blah. Your guy lost. I told you. No, because, you know, when I used to go on the mayor's station on Fridays, we used to talk about that. And I used to tell him, you know, we used to have a dialogue, and it was a good dialogue for a moment. But then, you know, I stopped going on because, you know, work issues came up, and I wasn't able to go. So no, I haven't heard that. But with me being a veteran, and lots of people I know in this being a military city, there's no way that you can tell me that these people are patriots who stormed the Capitol and tried to take it over, and threatening to kill the vice president, threatening to kill the
Speaker.
the House Speaker, and anybody, probably anyone they could have ran into. Yeah. That's not patriotism. And secondly, when you look at what happened, this wasn't spur of the moment. This wasn't anything spontaneous. This had to be planned. People don't just automatically just pop up and drive 18 hours a day. So this is some stuff that was planned.
And everybody had a backpack. Did you notice that?
A police officer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a backpack and
climbing gear, helmets,
and bomb put out? But you can't get me to realize this. A police officer was killed. Now, if that would have been a Mexican or a Black person or Muslim, the narrative on television would have been totally different. So when is it that law and order matters? When is it that blue lives matter? I mean, all those people that were killed, those 5 people that were killed at the Capitol, if I'm not mistaken, none of those were Black people. So when we talk about civility and calm, that's why I urge people to be very careful with their words, because we know there are fringes on both sides. So why would I take a chance on inciting someone to come out there and do something to you? I mean, you never heard any of those prominent Republicans say anything as long as it was AOC, Omar, or any of the squad members of Bernie or lives being threatened. I never heard them once urge calm. Nothing. But as soon as it was, I mean, even when it was the Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, no one urged calm. They were all quiet. Soon as it was the Secretary of State of Georgia and the Governor Kemp, now all of a sudden let's urge calm, let's be quiet. But these are the same people that you're talking to that were threatening AOC and the squad, that are threatening Kemp. So you don't expect someone from the Democratic Party to be able to have any influence over them to tell them to be quiet. I mean, what is Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi to tell these same people that wanted to kill AOC and the squad gonna do when they want to kill Governor Kemp and Secretary of State Roethlisberger? Yeah. For telling the truth? This man told the truth. He said there was no fraud. You lost the election. What do you? I mean, you want to kill him for that? Our own election officials had to put out a statement right here in Lowndes County. No dead people voted. No, your uncle's animal didn't vote. I mean, these are the things, because this stuff was going on because they couldn't believe that Donald Trump lost an election, because they've been told this for 4 or 5 years. So now you know why we're in this position, because they believed it.
Yeah.
is it unfair? Because one of the things that concerns me about it, and I said it in that letter I sent y'all, is that all I've heard the mayor talk about is the need for Joe Biden to pardon Donald Trump from the first impeachment. This was before the second impeachment happened. I have not heard our mayor talk about the 5 people that were killed, including a law enforcement officer. I've not heard him say whether he condoned or condemned the attack on the Capitol. All I've heard him say on the radio is about the need to unify the country. And he literally said, put blinders on, let's put our heads down and move forward, as if, and again, this is this thing of let's pretend like it didn't happen. And so I guess, am I out of line for having asked the mayor to make a public statement, given he here impacts how policing's done, he impacts all kinds of law enforcement and security issues are done. I'm not trying to suggest he's dangerous or anything like that, but it seems important to me, that someone who clearly thinks the election was fraudulent, because he says that and talks about it on his show, and so does his co-host. They did it today, which is the 2nd of February, a month and a half after, 2 months after all this stuff. Is it fair to ask him, well, what is your public position, given that what you're saying on your radio show is all we need to do is, forgive Donald Trump and move on?
As a citizen of the city of Valdosta, it's okay for you to ask any elected official any question that you want. You may not get the answer that you want. You may get a non-answer. But like I told the people at Valdosta Daily Times or all the news outlets, if you want to know how I feel, ask me. I'm going to always tell you. I'd rather tell you how I feel and you be upset, or tell you the truth and you be upset, but you'll know how I feel. Then me to lie to you, and now you can't take anything else I say at value. So I'd rather tell you the truth than to lie to you, and at least you'll know where I stand. So you can ask the mayor anything you want. You can ask me anything you want. I don't speak for the mayor. When the mayor is doing his personal thing, I guess he's still at the point where he's saying, he can do 2 things at once and people won't see it as being the mayor, but he's always going to be the mayor of Valdosta 24/7, no matter what he says. So I would like for him to understand that, but I can't tell him what to do. He's an adult, but I want you to know that me as a city councilman and as a representative of the city of Valdosta, I'm going to be careful with my words. I'm going to always think about whether or not what I'm saying is going to be offensive or divisive, especially when I know that it's our job to try to unify people, especially in a time like this. So I'm never going to use divisive terms. Now, if you call divisive telling you the truth that 9/11 happened and Parkland happened, and I'm just going to be divisive, because I don't want to be disrespectful to the people who lost loved ones there, because I cannot tell people that an airplane didn't fly into the towers. Because people are dead. So it's just, all I tell people is basic things, basic facts. The truth matters from both sides. There should not be a Republican or a Democrat that can't stand here together and say Parkland didn't happen. Now we can argue about what we can do with the gun policies. That's a policy issue. We can discuss that, but we should not be able to get here and have people thinking that it didn't happen. Those are the things that I'm talking about. Just plain, blatant lies that we should not be discussing in this society.
Do you have any suggestions for citizens that take concerns like I have to the mayor, and have him repeatedly ignore my request for a conversation, for clarity on his statements? I mean, again, I think he doesn't feel like he needs to answer to any of the things he said. I mean, we're trying to figure out what we do next. We have some plans, but what would your advice be to us, a community member, when elected officials do say inflammatory things, do say divisive things publicly, claim to be the mayor on their radio show when they say them, but then don't want to answer for anything?
Well, the only thing that I can suggest is let them know. I mean, each elected official, they have a phone number that's open to the public. They have an email that's open to the public. And then when you have the city council meeting, they have citizens to be heard. You let them know how you feel. You email them, you text them, you call them, you let them know how you feel. You write letters, and then ultimately, when it's time, you show them at the ballot box. You know, that's the only thing I can do, because I don't encourage violence and confrontation and any of that stuff.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is, as far as what I would do, I would call, I would continually email, I would do that thing. But as far as making him talk, I don't think you can, or just like you couldn't make me talk.
Yeah.
But as an elected official, I just felt that it was good for me to let you know that I'm not afraid to have a conversation with. I'm willing to engage. Yeah. But you know, some people, that's not their style.
Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we just talk about Antonio Smith for just a second? Because this was another concern that
I'll be happy to talk about what I can. Yes.
Yeah. What can you tell us about his situation? And for folks that don't know about this is a situation where Antonio Smith was walking down kind of the, not sidewalk, but the side of Ashley Street near Rodeo Mexican restaurant. And he was stopped by an officer who thought he had an outstanding warrant. The officer's talking with him. Another officer comes up behind him, grabs him, tells him to put his hands behind his back, and then slams him to the ground and breaks his wrist. And long story short, they got the wrong guy. He wasn't the person they were looking for. And I've watched the footage, a number of things. It's painful to watch, right? And I felt so bad for Mr. Smith, but I also, the full 11 minutes from the officer that Mr. Smith was talking to, Sergeant Wheeler never apologized for even making a mistake. And it's my understanding that he was also in the process of getting promoted, and he did in fact get promoted. I've seen the internal investigation that the police department did, and it was minimal at best. The officer Wheeler claimed that he rolled Mr. Smith to the ground, which in fact he didn't. He picked him up off the ground and slammed him down and fell on him with his full body weight. And so my understanding now is that there's a pending lawsuit. There's been request for a citizens review board. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. As I said, I used to work on West Hill Avenue not too long ago. And there've been some petty crimes committed. This is kind of close to where Forest Street intersects it. And one of the things, Mr. Howard, that struck me, there was a young guy fled on foot one day, and this is the middle of the day. And out of nowhere, 13 law enforcement cars showed up and chased this guy. 13. And I was thinking, good grief, marked and unmarked, right? That it was pretty clear to me that this community that's not far from where I grew up has this police presence that's just overwhelming. And you would have thought they were chasing a murderer, you know. And so I think I bring that up because I think the request for a citizens review board from the people I've talked with isn't just about the Smith case. It's about police profiling in the community, predominantly, of Black folks. I don't know how many stories I've heard from white collar Black folks who are professionals that have a nice car and get pulled over for nothing. People who are veterans, people who, are, professionals. They're full, upstanding citizens. And my understanding is that there's not going to be any more investigation by the police department, that the city, I saw what the mayor said online, and he brought out these statistics about the use of force that I didn't think were real relevant, but he didn't really say anything about that particular case, at least not publicly that I've heard of. So I'm kind of curious of what you can tell us about it now in terms of status and what your thoughts were about it.
Well, the case is pending as far as, they're litigating as far as a settlement for Mr. Smith. So that's first and foremost. The city wants to make sure that Mr. Smith is made whole. And now, as far as all of the details of the story, some of it was factual and some of it was a little bit off. But you had the story.
How can you get
but yeah, Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, the police were called on Mr. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Walgreens had called on Mr. Smith.
Right. He was clearly upset
at the same time. Another person was.
Yeah.
Right, but at the same time, in the back of the store, the person that had the felony warrant was the person that the other officer thought was Mr. Smith. So either way, it shouldn't have happened.
Right.
Mr. Smith should have never been touched. So no. So we're not trying to excuse it. I'm not trying to excuse it in any way. But what I'm not gonna do, and I think this is where we run into this. I won't say gray area. We just run into, disagreement. I'm not gonna throw a police officer under the bus and just get rid of his 20 years worth of service to the city. Should he be disciplined? Yes. Should that type of stuff? Yeah. But I can't get into the any more than that because it's up, it's still pending litigation on it. So I that's as much as I can say on it. But as far as
was he disciplined? Was he disciplined?
But see, that's what I try to tell people. We didn't find out about any of this until right before it got ready to go public. So since then, mayor and council have put in policies where if there's any type of physical altercation with an officer, that mayor and council must be notified within 24 hours. But before then, none of that was in place.
So
now since this incident, that has been put in place.
But so he and
so before then, none of that.
Yeah. Well, and just be clear, I don't have all the facts, and the facts are hard to get. So I'm not suggesting that I know exactly what happened. I know what I saw on 2 different body cams, but
right.
So I'm not suggesting throwing the officer under the bus either. What is clear to me, though, whether the officer was having a bad day or whatever, is that he used excessive force. The guy was talking to another officer that wasn't asking for assistance. And then after he throws him to the ground and breaks his wrist, he kind of blames the officer that Mr. Smith was talking to for not telling him who Mr. Smith was when he never gave that officer an opportunity to say, hey, this isn't the guy. So no one's wanting him to get fired or dismissed, but it does seem like a couple of things that some disciplinary action should have happened within the police department. I don't know what that would be. I'm not a law enforcement.
I agree.
Right. And as well as policy, making sure this doesn't happen again. And that though doesn't address a lot of the larger concerns about profiling in the community. So did that come up at all for the council members?
Right. Yeah. That came up, and I tell people all the time, what we see isn't always what we get. Because let's just say, for instance, if you're a store clerk and you called and said someone just snatched something off your counter, on that conversation, that person may have said, did they have a weapon? They said, well, I don't know. I thought I may have. So you may send 4 or 5 officers versus 1. Because that 911 tape, when she's talking to that officer, or that cashier may be talking to that officer, or they may just say that to get you out there in a hurry. You never know what information has been relayed to an officer. So that incident when you said it could have been 13 people.
No, there were 13 cars. 13 cars.
That's the thing.
In the middle of the day.
That's what I'm saying. They don't know. Exactly. But I'm saying, when that 911 call came in, that person who called it in could have said that that I mean, I don't know what information they received.
No, it wasn't. It was a traffic. It was
it was what happened.
It was a traffic stop. I watched
because I don't know what information the 911 officer got.
Yeah, no, I got you. It was a traffic stop at the store I worked at. The kid didn't have a driver's license, and he might have had a warrant. He, and he just took off running, and he didn't assault the officer or anything. So it wasn't a 911 call. It was the officer calling for backup, and like from every imaginable direction, which also made me think that, man, like, do folks have this much time on their hand, and how could this one person that was probably 19 be this dangerous? You know what I'm saying? It just, and then again, folks in the community, many of them are pastors that I've talked with, will talk about getting pulled over, So I guess I just bring that up to just wonder if on the city's radar, if that's a point of conversation too. And it does seem like everybody's real sensitive and don't want to offend the police, because there are good law enforcement officers. I know that. I've worked with some. But I do feel like a lot of folks in the community feel like the response to Mr. Smith, as well as this other topic, is kind of hazy, and they don't know where it's at. And that, that's a kind of another thing when we talk about jobs coming here. If we're making the national news for, people being brutalized by the police, or at least that's the perception, that can't be good for the city's image.
Well, I like I said, I can say that I can understand why it's kind of hazy, because once you go into that legal realm, that there's only so much you can say, because I don't want to say anything as a council person, and then I get the officer more money because I said something I shouldn't have said. Then I get Antonio Smith, the person who was wronged. So you have to kind of balance it, but you also have to let the community know that we take this serious and we're serious about it, and it's going to be addressed. But there's pending litigation, so you can't say. There's a lot of things that you can't say. But what I am going to say, I would much rather live in a society, in a community with police than without.
Yeah.
So well, I'm not one of those people who's gonna just say all police are bad. I'm not gonna do that, because I have too many police officers that I know, I respect, and I know they do the job the correct way. And I can name off several of them. But what I'm not gonna do is justify bad policing. No, if it's a bad police, and like I said, that goes back to something that I think we need to have on the federal level, because they should have the same, afforded the same rights as you and I. If you go out here and shoot someone accidentally, you're going to be prosecuted. I think police officers should be held to the same standard. I know their job is different, but if you're running away from me, I'm not a tough guy. I've never been afraid of anyone running away from me. So if you shoot someone running away from you, they don't pose a threat to you, especially if they don't have a weapon. Now you could say this guy's running out into the street with a gun, get ready to shoot up innocent bystanders, so I had to take him down. But if someone's running away from you with no weapon, you shoot him in the back, you need to be prosecuted. So I'm not, like I say, I'm not one of those bash the police officers. I love our police officers, but if you know you're wrong, you need to be held accountable. And I just think that's the best way to do it. That's just fair across the board. So I'm just one of those people who it's just fair. Gotcha. But I'm not gonna say anything that that I'm not at liberty to say right now.
No worries. I appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to talk about before we kind of wrap it up? And thank you again for making time and for being one of the few folks that were willing to talk with me and kind of add your insight to this conversation.
I really want to say that I think these conversations are needed, and with your platform, I wish that someday you can expand it. Well, maybe we can do this on a regular, whether I'm in office or not. But as long as I'm in office, I'll be happy to conversate with anyone about any topic. But I want people to realize, like I say, when I really mean this when I say we need to be careful and mindful with our words, because our words matter, especially when it comes from leadership. I mean, we may not believe our positions, our position is that powerful, but people are looking at us. People pay attention to what we say, and if you can't tell the people the truth, it really hurts, because I think right now that's what a lot of this country is going through now. You know, we've been told some things that's not true, and people believe it because, like you said, there's some people out there who feel aggrieved, that feel like minorities are coming to take the country that they once lived in and loved. So yeah, I really think that's part of a conversation that we need to continue to have.
Will any of this, have y'all had y'all's retreat yet? Will y'all have a retreat this year as council?
It's going to be in March.
Gotcha. Will that be a point of conversation, you think, in terms of, it seems to me that council as well as the county commission could be proposing, you know, some community effort to start dialogue and conversations across lines. And I just wonder, have y'all talked about that as a body?
I really feel that it's needed.
Yeah, but have y'all talked about it though?
I talk about that at every meeting as far as our words and stuff, but I would definitely put that on my list to discuss as a retreat at a retreat issue. So when you know, I would love to do this when we can do it safely, even if we have to do it in a building with just the commissioners and the, you know, city councilman, and we just take questions from the community via Zoom or something like that, or, you know, like we do Citizens to be Heard or something like that. Because my first priority right now is to make sure that everyone stays safe from COVID. So I definitely don't want to put a lot of people in a place, but I figure with this councilman and the mayor and the county commission, we can have it in a place where we can space out enough where we can, you know, at least take the questions from the citizens and have a discussion. So like I said, everyone knows where everyone stands on an issue.
Well, thank you again for doing this. And can we do it again in a few weeks? It'd be great to check back in with you and just see where things are at.
Anytime, you just let
we can
me know,
do more than just we can add some more people if you know of folks that want to join the conversation. That way you won't have to hear me run my mouth so much. But it'd be great to have some more voices in the conversation.
It's fine with me. I told you, I think dialogue is the only way we're going to get past some of our issues. So I will be happy to talk with you again anytime.
Okay, I appreciate it, Mr. Howard. I'm going to turn this off and then we can wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you've had a long day, so thank you.